Okay, so welcome to Beyond the Title, firstly. But obviously, we'll get onto your major accomplishments in a moment. But I just wanted to get a glimpse of your relationship with TV growing up. Who were your heroes?
Oh gosh. Well, I've started as I've carried on with a very kind of superficial attitude to the world. Basically, I just I like comedy, so anything too heavy um felt alien, and that's a terrible admission to start with, isn't it? That I'm basically daft. But so I remember an example of that might be that I remember watching Up Pompeii with Frankie Howard as a kind of I might have been 10 or something, and thinking this is the world I want to be in, of amusement and I think you tuck things behind your ear, don't you, when you're 10, 7, 13, and you circle back to them when you are a so-called adult. So I thought I I wanted to be a writer, I think, quite early on, and but obviously it takes a while to sit down and do it. But so that kind of thing. I had a quite sort of standard middle class background growing up in the countryside in Sussex, and my parents were teachers, so we'd veer towards the BBC perhaps rather than ITV, because that's what you do. And had a part of quite a big family, so I was surrounded by people, and that I think maybe helps the um, the writing process. You remember those conversations when you're in later life. So I had a a happy childhood that is again possibly helps if you want to write comedy, as I have done most of the time.
Hmm. Having interviewed a whole host of writers from different backgrounds, I'd say your route into entertainment was pretty unconventional. How did a career in novel translations help you to get where you wanted to be? And can you take us through the process of translating a novel? And are you bilingual?
I'm not really bilingual. I was in my gap year, before it was called a gap year. I worked in a hotel in France for 6 months, and I was pretty good by the time I came back. But then that's the tragedy of language, isn't it? And if you keep them up, they die on you. Um, but actually I didn't so much translate fiction. It was mainly uh, art books and a bit of literary sort of criticism, and then I ran out of money, so I got a couple of corporate jobs as a translator for a Swiss bank, would you believe? And I do think it was a part of the fact that I managed to sort of write my first couple of novels while I was working for the bank, because nobody knows what you're doing when you've got a screen there. Um, Translating does hone your craft as a writer, and particularly as a comedy writer, I think, because it is about often just the word, just tweaking a word turns a dull sentence into to something more efficient. And I am so I think it made me learn the weight of a word in a sentence, and things that happen sort of automatically, just to know to put the important or the funny word towards the end of the sentence or at the end. So that is that kind of help that a translating job gave me, and also just the practice of sitting down. It's often writing is just about having the sometimes being dull enough to not be distracted by the world around you, and just sitting down and doing the hours.
Hmm.
I remember to
Josh said when he was at university, they did a unit on editing, and they had to edit a whole script, and he really struggled with getting his head around that thing of sitting down and sort of adapting someone else's work and trying to sort of edit someone else's work. Was that something you sort of
Yeah, sometimes you, especially if you're working for a Swiss bank, as you were, and like a sort of, bleeding heart liberal that yeah, I am. You think I don't really want to translate this because this is about, basically saying why we're capitalist dogs and why we're not going to, you know, let loads go for so I mean you deal with the, I mean, it's nice first step to be said, nice to arrive at work with the work, somebody's done some work, so it's not the blank page.
Mm.
It's but yeah, it's not always, it wasn't fun to, it's nice to be able to, what we would think of as perfecting the original piece of text, but often it's uh you're obviously your job really as a translator is to reflect everything about the original. So if it's bad prose, you should sort of reflect that quality. But yeah, it's not, I mean, the kind of pure creativity doesn't really exist because you're always working with other people, you're writing characters. So we're all compromised in what we do. But I know what you mean. There are frustrations in working with other people, and I'm sure they feel the same about working with me.
They say everyone has a novel in them, and I guess in your experience with the sort of translation world, gave you a bit of an insight in how maybe how you go about sort of some of that publishing work. What was it about the flat share experience that made you think that it would be a perfect setting for a novel?
Well, when I wrote it, actually, I was in my mid-20s and I live in Camden Town, and I actually was sharing a house with five other women. So it wasn't really about men at all. It was just about sharing a space, and they weren't as crass as the Memory Valley characters, but that kind of idea that you're just in there, you're having, you're thrown in together into a building together, and you either you get on half the time, sometimes you argue, so, but obviously it is about maleness as well. So I am, and I did find writing for men, which is, obviously the heart of Memory Valley, important though the female characters are as well. Easier. And I think it was just, as Martin Clunes said in his podcast with you, Josh, he said, that it's the daftness and the sort of the self delusion of a drink inspired male chat that is so, well, on a good day it's funny, sometimes it's pathetic and a bit, and it can be alarming, but it's just a sort of, men are just used to talking to each other, and the gender, war and sexual difference throws up kind of complications and seriousness that is absent from sometimes from men talking to men. So I just like the fact that they like being together. And I suppose I obviously had studenty friendships where we would get pissed and we would talk nonsense, and
Yeah. Yeah. Um, British television is packed full of legends and icons, both in front and behind the camera. But on Men Behaving Badly, you got to work with one of the true pioneers of entertainment. What are your memories of the great Beryl Virtue, and what's her legacy?
well, I owe her my career, certainly my TV career. I'd written maybe Mandy, a novel which was, had its, well, a lot of faults. It wasn't actually a very good novel, basically. So but I saw its TV um future, and just thought, there's a lot of dialogue in the book, so it was sort of on its way to being a sitcom already, but I didn't think, even, I don't know why, I thought maybe actors made it up or something. I didn't think clearly about the career, so I needed her to talk me through the process of, turning or writing a sitcom. And yeah, incredibly lucky that she of all people saw the novel and was there, because she just knew everything about comedy and the business, and she's had a couple of lean years, I think. So she was particularly keen to get something away, and she just taught me through it, and she was there all the time. She showed, my script to people that were helpful. She put up with my shaky first drafts, and she remained a friend until she died at the final age of 90. And I owe her everything, really.
Just said he was lucky enough to meet her at the BBC a few years ago, and she had a bright pink walking stick, which she was very proud of.
She was very stylish, and she had but very remained, knew her strengths, which were kind of plain speaking, and she always, the rest of us, meetings, say with people, the hierarchy of broadcasting, we'd all nod and say, yeah, absolutely. And but Beryl, without understanding what the hell we were being told, really, or and Beryl would always say, "What do you mean?" Um, and because we do all bullshit a lot in this industry, tragically. So I love the fact that she was just very clear and just very funny, and you'd find out things even that I, quite late on, that the people that she knew, and she knew she's very modest, so much missed.
Men Behaving Badly took a satirical glance at the phenomenon of lag culture in the early to mid-90s. As a writer, what was it about Britain's evolving socio-economic and political structure that deserved satirising in this way, and how conscious were you about making a social comment about 90s Britain?
Martin Clunes talked about this, isn't he? And I'm not brainless, but I really wasn't interested in any of that. I mean, I like a lot of men in that period, I'd experienced women's a different reaction from women's to men, and in some cases, and then the new man sort of phenomenon had just, I think that was in the sort of late 80s, in which men sort of tried it on and played the sensitivity card in a rather bogus way. So they weren't, we were lying about how sensitive we were, really, and sometimes in an effort to be less crass, but often there was a falsity about men trying to sort of be what they weren't, and women sniffed it out and said, you're just, this is nonsense, and we want authentic men, to intelligent, authentic men, rather than people trying to pull the wool over our eyes. So I was aware that there was things were changing and women were expecting slightly less idiocy from from us, and so it was, so I suppose Dorothy in Men Behaving Badly embodies that, in that she sort of had enough, and she's happy to go out with Gary, because he's can be good fun, and he's but she just doesn't put up with it anymore, and I think so that there were things going on in society that, but as Martin said, I mean, we really just did want to have a laugh, and I know, if that sounds sort of banal and a bit silly, then so be it, because I think at least the jokes come first, the character comes first, and then let's see, by all means, what we've created here, and sort of deal with those subjects intelligently, but don't let the tail wag the dog. Make sure the show is funny above all.
Yeah, definitely. Despite being a very forward-thinking sitcom, Men Behaving Badly used many of the elements of traditional sitcom, with a studio audience and a laughter track for exterior scenes, and the use of the three-act structure. With the benefit of hindsight, what effect would a slightly more modern approach to the sitcom format have had upon the show?
Yeah, good question. Well, Peep Show's a good example of what brilliant show, and sort of, I mean, if you like, every sort of every decade presents a version of of what we were doing. So the Likely Lads, and then us, and then Peep Show, and others. And I I mean, it's a sort of naturalism question, isn't it, really? And the theatricality of a sitcom annoys some people, an audience sitcom. But I do, again, Martin talked about this. I do there's on a good night, that it's just it's a theatrical event. The it's fun. It's audibly fun, and you can't get that without an audience response. And we've all listened to watch sitcoms, audience sitcoms, few that they are now, and thought, why are they laughing like that? And why that's so annoying. And the rhythm is held up, and it's so I absolutely understand people that don't like them so much, but it's a different kind of show, is all I would say. And maybe we will go back to them, maybe we won't, but some great, Grandin and more recently, and then in the noughties, and there's are people still doing them, and not going out, still popular with an audience, but not having an audience obviously frees you up also to do some of the subtleties of relationships and comedy, and there are times when I would love to have done something a little bit more low key and a slightly more thoughtful scene, but you can't have it all. And I do miss audience sitcoms.
In your opinion, what's the legacy of Men Behaving Badly on the comedy output of today?
Well, I don't know. One never knows. I mean, there's a lot of shows out there, and we're one of a panorama of comedy, and the I hope it sort of is remembered as a I suppose a more innocent, something from a more innocent age. And I think innocence actually, despite some people finding it sort of cynical and a bit sad about human behavior, I think it was actually rather a sort of simple and innocent show, and we were, we didn't swear, partly because we weren't allowed to, and so there was a kind of childlike quality to it that I Panto-esque, if you like, which I still rather like.
After Men Behaving Badly, you wrote quite a different sitcom in Beast, which starred Alexander Armstrong and Doon Mackichan. What was this like, approaching that difficult second novel? And as a prolific name within the industry, how much pressure were you under to deliver another hit?
Well, no pressure really. You don't feel it. Nobody sits you down and says, "Come on, this has got to work," because you're one of the many people that are pitching to be on it. I mean, I never, although I had quite a few sitcoms on, and I was lucky enough to having had one hit, you're given a kind of free pass to try more others. Sometimes I'm sure I didn't deserve that chance, but I just love doing them. And the kind of routine of the rhythm of it is a week on an episode, read through, and then you work on it, and then you come to a live audience at the end of the week, and it's a great fun sort of process, except the times when it's hideous and awful, and if it goes wrong and you realize you've got a duff episode on your hands. It does happen, but so I just carried on, as long as I was allowed to do them. I was just delighted and didn't really feel the pressure, except the pressure of an audience coming in at the end of the week. And you can see, you can sense in a room when it's going badly. And so you just want to kind of avoid that. And also every different show has different actors generally. And so it's all different, and the vibe is different. But I haven't done an audience sitcom which hasn't been fun really in terms of making it.
Josh asked, how often did you need to sort of rewrite stuff during the recording?
During the actual recording on the day, I mean, I haven't done an audience sitcom for quite a while, but we would occasionally, but I'm not, I'm not. It's not my strength. So I rewrite during the week, and sometimes, but not often, but actually sometimes, an actor would say, sort of, you'd see the sadness in their eyes, and then you'd see them thinking, surely this is the better line out there somewhere. So I would go and try and work on that. But I mean, I went to uh, when the Americans did Remember Having Valley version, which didn't go that well, but they did make 30 odd episodes, and I've seen other sitcoms in LA, and they've got a team of writers, so that there's more, and it's what they do. So they work on stuff on the night sometimes, which is why sometimes shows, I went to see an episode of Friends being made, and it was, we left after 4 hours, and they had another 4 hours to go. So we weren't going to put the audience through that. So basically we went with what was there, but I did occasionally tweak lines on the night, but and some, I mean, some shows they they rewrite, well, not completely, but a lot of the show is rewritten during the week, and I didn't tend to do that.
British comedy is constantly recycling and updating old formats for new audiences and generations. In 2009, you were tasked with updating Reggie Perrin to a 21st century demographic. I've now interviewed Martin Clunes and Faye Ripley, and they've both had very different opinions on whether or not it was a good idea. But as a writer, how daunting was it to step into the shoes of the legendary David Nobbs?
He was a legend, and I love the original, and I love the novels actually. His novels are genuinely, up there with his TV work. Well, he was there, so we were doing it together, which is part of the reason that I was the appeal of it, really. Although in the end, I did most of the writing, and I mean, well, you can justify. I know I can understand people who thought it was a big mistake, and we do redo shows, and I've redone other ones as well. Because when it works, it really can work, and also it felt like the things that David Nobbs, I don't know what Faye Ripley said about it, but David Nobbs, in his genius original, he just showed what it's like to feel alienated from your work and the kind of madness of office life. And it felt like those themes were even more real and urgent 20 years on, 30 years on. So it felt like it would be, that's why it was worth revisiting. And our version had its moments, but it perhaps the shadow of the original series was just too long and deep. And but you travel hopefully in this business, and you imagine the best it can be. And things like The American Office is such genius, and sort of is every match of the British show. And I suppose as long as that sort of thing happens, you think, well, we will go back in and try again and see if we can, in an ideal world, enhance the original or bring something new to it.
So beyond sitcom, you've done many things, but interestingly, you were responsible for writing all of the editions of the ITV pantomime. How different is the writing process to create a pantomime compared to a typical sitcom or drama? And how difficult is it to write for performers who perhaps aren't quintessential actors?
Well, I mean, it's obviously longer pantomime. It's sort of three sitcoms bolted together. I mean, the great thing about panto is that the plots are there, and they're tried and tested, and they're insane in many ways, lots of them, and doing things that we feel awkward about now, like sort of cultural appropriation. If that's not too daft a concept to bring in when you talk about Aladdin and things like that. But it is it's just a joy, and the reason there's a good reason why pantomime is shoring up a lot of British theatre commercially, because it's a deep pleasure when it goes well, and the audience interaction with the cast is that sort of extra unknown, which makes the evening work well. So on television, we didn't have that abilities. So we were although we did four, and I think they were in their different ways. They were they had them again. They had their comedy moments that I cherish, but and the actors were great. So Julian Clary and Paul Merton, people who would be I think the first to admit they're not actors above all. They did a great job, because they know how to handle an audience. And no, I love a pantomime, and it's you do sort of leave your brain at home. I think sometimes we need to do that. Not talk about the writing process. Sometimes as an audience, you check it.
Period drama remains notoriously difficult to write because essentially you're straddling both sides of history and fantasy. What was the process you took to create the award-winning The Durrells, and in what ways did you change your style to fit that cozy Sunday night drama atmosphere?
Well, it's story is actually, I was going to say story is more of a concern when you're doing the Durrells because it's an hour-long drama. But actually, I came over the course of my sitcom writing career to realize that how important plot is. And initially, when I was dabbling at the beginning and just wrote, just chat, really, you realize quickly that chat is going to get you through. So the Durrells was again me needing to make the plots work better, keep it full. Really, I think that sense of fullness in a show is what can be hard to achieve. You want, it's basically things happening, obviously, but it's also each character. You got to serve each character, and if there are 6, 7 main characters as they were in the Durrells, then you've got to juggle all their plots and their motivation and keep it funny. And although it is, I hope it was a warm show to watch, we also like to smuggle in a bit of adult rudery and a bit of sort of subtlety here and there. And of course, above all, it looked lovely. So I was a bit prissy sometimes about language, and because having been a translator, I did. And the Durrells are set in the 30s, and I'm sure I got things wrong, but I was quite keen to make the vocabulary appropriate to the age, and people didn't really say okay, so I did try and make it historically accurate, at least. But it's great. I mean, as a writer, it's great to be able to just move outside the genre you're used to, and I've really done most things, and I think it's helped me remain interested in the job and not sort of too atrophied.
The great Ben Elton once told me that shows can't date if you set them in the past. Where do you think our fascination with historical fiction comes from?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not. I mean, that is true basically about not dating, but until you watch lots, we do bring obviously our own era into whatever we're doing, and we've all seen periods that it's more true of films actually, where like 60s historical things where heavy eye makeup they just couldn't resist, and they so there's no escape really the age in which you're working from. But I am it's the kind of it's possibly a question of innocence again, the kind of innocence of the past, not always innocence. Obviously, there's a lot more perhaps cruelty, you'd say, and Blackadder, for example, a lot of it is about the kind of the cruel. You and the characters, and it's there are side benefits like his language texture and historical jokes and winking at the past and things. So it's I love a historical sitcom, and Upstart Crow was obviously Ben Elton's latest one, was just great, and it really had a lot of intelligence running through it, historical and aware of historically and aware of Shakespeare's writing being rather blended beautifully in with it. So yeah, let's have some more. Commission me.
Yeah. The role of a writer is somewhat invisible and removed from the glamour of the spotlight. As a writer, how grateful are you that you've still been able to maintain your anonymity?
Well, sometimes, yeah, I am grateful. And I just occasionally writer's vanity emerges in well, it bursts in out in kind of bitter a sense of one's worth not being fully respected. But that's a very pompous thing to say because it's great. Yeah, I mean, and having especially again Martin Clunes and Neil and Caroline and Leslie during the 90s, when Remember Having Valley was in full flow, them describing their, you know, just it's hard, isn't it, to have a life where people know who you are, calling out in the street, and and also sort of slightly reducing your complex personality to a character you played. So that must be galling. But yeah, very happy to be unknown, and especially as we are can be quite writers can be generally rather dull and or internalized, so you don't get much value out of us necessarily. If somebody coming up and saying if they knew we were what we'd written, expecting frankly some value from a conversation that they might not get because our heads are some script, or we're just not interesting.
Looking back at your career, what's your proudest achievement?
um oh gosh, well, I still is this something to be proud of? I'm still wanting to make to be funny, but to also to be silly and just I haven't done what some writers, likes of Woody Allen say, have kind of rather written off their comedy past and have, I mean, that I should be so compared, I'm no Woody Allen, but I do think he's and some people like that have been embarrassed by the comedy end of the spectrum of their writing, and I just want to do more. I want to celebrate um the cheer that that comes from a good comedy that you get under the skin of. So I'm pleased that I'm not cynical about the role of comedy in the in my life and other people's lives. I mean, there's specific shows that I've done. So I did a show called How Do You Want Me with Dylan Moran, and that I felt was it was about the county I grew up in, Sussex, and it sort of had a had we were talking about the sort of naturalism and how audience sitcoms struggle with this, obviously for obvious reasons, and this was my first attempt to do something that was more natural and sort of and I enjoyed doing that, but I'm still writing, I think, is and getting shows on occasionally is my, I suppose, my proudest achievement, and because it can be exhausting, but it's a great job. I mean, of all the jobs, obviously acting is fun when you got the work that you want, but just the quiet satisfactions of writing, being on your own, with a bunch of characters is just, you can't beat it, and I'm glad to be still doing it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Josh asked, how important do you think your reputation alone is in terms of getting you those gigs now?
Well, I think if you're on if you allow your life to be we perhaps overuse the word define, but if you allow your happiness and sense of fulfillment to be judged by how much work you're getting, then that's a bad place to be. So if I don't ever work again, then I'd be very, that's fine. I've had my go, but it's a but it's just great to have people reacting to something that you've created, and so many of us don't have the chance to express ourselves, and And so that's the joy of it, really. And actually, I think it's an area in which people are there's more access to, through the social media, people can make make an impression and express themselves, and even if it's only irritation with their life. So I think I've got a great platform for just creating worlds and characters and jokes. And I think there's a kind of democratizing going on, and social media has allowed people to express themselves more, either through whatever medium they like. So but there's nothing better than being a writer of a comedy show or some kind of comedy vehicle, and having people laugh at you. It's still amazes me, really.
Last question. What's next for Simon Nye?
Oh, I've got irons in various fires, and I'm never talk about things until they're on, so I won't do that. But just as I say, carrying on, and keep interested in the world, because although it's harder to, I've got 4 kids in their 20s now, but they feed my imagination, and they keep me straight, and so I think you need to be a good writer, you need, and especially at my age, you need to be aware a little bit of what's going on, and just embrace the world and all its perfections. So I hope I can just continue doing what I'm doing, and just try to make sense of the world and make fun of it, really. That's all we can do, and try and enjoy it.
Right. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Josh, for having me on. Really nice. I'm standing among giants when I look at who you've interviewed in the past.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your time. We really appreciate it.